So I was going to say devotees to the dark gods, but this list build, this template, although I utilize it with my Chaos Space Marine army, it can easily apply to any 40K army out there, including yours. One of the things that we are looking to do is this idea of an army template, where parts of your list work to achieve something on the table, but it is not unit specific. And what I mean by that, just to lay a foundation here for this podcast, many 40K armies, in the way lists are built, you'll take one unit that is really awesome, either a high volume of dice or in the moment, Games Workshop favors certain models. I mean, as much as they're a game company, they say really they're a model company. They're there to sell models. And every edition of 40K, we could say, has really good models and not so good models. So one of the ways you build a competitive list is just to analyze what's in your decks, your codex, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and take the best and spam it out. It works. But I'm kind of a believer in it's a hobby. It's a narrative. We're trying to win, but there's a reason why we're playing with miniatures and making terrain versus some sort of old school Avalon Hill hexes with markers on a map. We're building, we're painting, we're collecting, we're expanding, we're converting. So I believe you should play the models you want to play. If you want to play all Assault Marines, you want to play all Terminators, you want to play Dreadnoughts, how do we make them work on the table? And how do we make them work in a variety of ways so you have options against other armies that you go against? This is the idea of many of the templates that I'm pushing out onto my blog and that are up there in the archives that you can search and download and listen to. Swing Wing. That is what we're looking at here. This concept started with my Samhan Warhost, and it has evolved to work with my Necrons, and it has evolved to work with my Chaos Space Marine army. Not the best with my Chaos Space Marine army based on certain tactics that I'm utilizing. That's more of a phase overload list. A phase overload is where we have the movement phase, the shooting phase, the assault phase, the psychic phase. You take all your points and you put them into one phase. So the idea is you're going to overwhelm your opponent. But again, having these options, this swing wing works. So what we're going to do, and I find it sometimes helpful to actually physically lay out all the models that I own for that army, even if they're not ones I utilize all the time, and then put them in the groups or kind of put little markers on paper next to them of what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, to begin to conceptualize and do this exercise. So if you want to kind of do that along with me, that's good. We'll pause it. You come back. So the idea here, when we're building an army, is that we want to have integration. You want everything to be working together. When it doesn't work together, or you begin to isolate pieces, that means your opponent can begin to take your list apart. The best analogy I can think of is imagine, okay, I have my Grey Knights, right? Land Raiders, Strike Squads, Terminators, Dreadnoughts. If I put them all the way over to the right side of the table, as far as I can, but I take one Dread and I put them all the way over to the left side of the table, I march that Dread up the left side of the table, all the way on the left side. I march everything up all the way on the right. When you move into range to take out the Dreadnought and you shoot at it and you destroy it, there's no consequences. There's no return. Where if I had that lone Dread over with the rest of my army and I'm marching forward, you take out the Dread, which I hope you don't, but if you do, now that means everything else in my knight list is ready to shoot back. You're not going to get away with it. I'm going to make you pay for it a little bit. This is why in wargaming we don't want to isolate our units. We don't want to have something hanging out over to the side, or we don't want to have something operating on its own, alone, without support, unless it's a suicide unit or something to that effect. We also want to have overlapping in that if I have something that is a bunch of infantry, I want to have something supporting it that can take out any tanks or that can take out anti-infantry stuff. If I see a unit coming forward with a lot of DACA, I want to stop it with something powerful at long range, because if it rolls up and just blows up all my infantry, that's not going to work from that perspective there. The Swing Wing breaks all that. Swing Wing takes everything that you're supposed to do in 40K and just says, okay, here's what we're going to do right now. So when you build your list, if we kind of break it down, you're going to have certain units that are anti-tank, meaning they can generate high volume, high strength shots, strip those wounds down. You've got anti-infantry that can put out a lot of shots and just force your opponent to roll a lot of dice to make those saves. You're going to have some fast-moving units, all the elements of your list that are going to be operating. You are going to create 3 smaller lists, 3 independent lists. So if you're playing at 2,000 points, you're going to do like 500 points, 500 points, 500 points, and then divvy up the other 500 among the 3 where you need a little bit of help. 3 small, tiny armies on the table, 3 in 1. This is why I find it helps to have your models kind of out to see it and to figure it out. Now when you deploy, regardless of the mission, you're going to take one of those independent army groups and put it all the way to the left of your gaming table, up against the quarter, kind of like a castle up. You're going to take one all the way on the right side of the table, put it there, and one right in the middle. So you've got them equally spaced out, 1, 2, 3, center, left, and right. It's its own little army. It's got anti-assault, it's got an assault element in it, it's got shooting, it's got movement, it's got everything. You are going to slowly advance each one of those pieces up the table. So the left is going to go on the left, the right on the right, the center up the center. Eventually your opponent is going to make contact. They're going to choose to attack one of those groups primarily, just based on how they deploy. And remember, their army is working on synergy. So let's just say in this example, they're going to attack that center group. They're going to move forward. And you kind of know sometimes what they're going to attack based on the mission parameters, based on the terrain that favors them. So if you have a couple of floating extra points, you could make one of your 3 armies a little bit more beefy, a little bit more powered up on there if you know they're going to come in the right or they're going to come in the center based on terrain, based on what they have. So let's say they're going to hit the center group first. As you advance that center group up the center of the table, when you make contact, meaning you can shoot your opponent and they can shoot you, you are going to dig in. You're going to try and you're not going to worry about having that center group removing models and blowing stuff up. You're going to try and make it as hard as possible for your opponent to remove that center army. You're going to dig in. You're going to try and get mad cover. You're going to try and assault, maybe to tie them up, or just intermix your units. Whatever you have to do to drag it out. Get your opponent to commit more to that center. What we're trying to do in the swing wing, if we can use the mathematical formula, the math hammer, if I have 500 points in that middle piece, and it doesn't have to be exact 500, right? It could be 580, 560, 600. But if I have 500 points in that center piece, I want it to become such a pain that my opponent has to commit 7, 8, 1,000 points. I want them to take more units off and commit. So you have to kind of know when to dig in, and maybe you pull back a little bit out of range so they don't get as many shots in. They commit more on there. The swing then happens where on the left and on the right, you're going to go around, you're going to literally swing those elements of your army and attack what's weak with your opponent in their deployment zone. You're going to try and gobble up those small little units. You're going to try and inflict as much damage as you can early on. So the other 2 elements of your army, they're going to be the swing wing. If we reset, right? I got on the left, I got on the right, I got in the center. I advance all 3 at once. You want to give your opponent equal contact for all 3. Let's say they engage on the left. Again, terrain or mission or for whatever reason, that's where they engage on there. The left side is going to pull back a little bit. The left side is going to dig in. The center is going to push forward and then move to the left. And on the right side, it's going to push forward really far into their deployment zone and swing to the left. That's the swing wing. You're going to look to compress. This started out with my Samhan Warhost because essentially I played 3 units, and I still do. Jet bikes, Vipers, Wave Serpent, Fire Prisms, essentially Fire Prism, Wave Serpent chassis. Seer Council on bikes, Farseers on bikes, Autarchs on bikes, things like that. But essentially I would break it up where I'd have a unit of jet bikes, a unit of Vipers, and a Wave Serpent or Fire Prism. That's the first group. Bikes, Vipers, Wave Serpent, second group. Third group, bikes, Vipers, Fire Prism. Council or other Autarch on bikes, things like that, depending on the addition of 40K, maybe sprinkled in, or maybe it's on its own unit to kind of react, and I would just push forward, swing, attack what I can. The key is when you swing with the swing wing, you have to go for what is weakest that your opponent has. So another piece in your 40K, tool, tech, kit, try it out. It might work for your army. It might not. It might need some tweaking. You might take half the idea. But again, the idea is a template that you can slot in the models you want to play and have an answer for 40K.